Welcome to another Raid Shadow Legends video, guys. Hopefully you are having an amazing day. A bit early with the news today. As a surprise, right, we are going to talk about the summoning events that are going to happen this weekend. Now, I do want to give you guys a massive warning. Keep in mind the fusion is coming to an end probably tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken, or the day after. On top of it, expect to see a Path of Light event or something similar starting next week that most probably will give us the soul for Wixwell. Now, I would strongly suggest you do not burst all of your sacreds during these 2x. Why? Because we constantly have 2x events every second week. You are not missing out on anything whatsoever, but you do have the chance of missing on the soul for the Path of Light event. This is not something that they confirmed, but it's just kind of like following the pattern from the last few fusions, you know? If we are quickly having a look right here at the calendar, nothing is displayed so far. So I can definitely tell you that most probably we will have a champion chase tournament starting tomorrow during the 2x on sacred shards. Now, together with the sacred shards, we will have some events on the 10x events on the faction unity champions, all of them. Now, I'm gonna quickly walk you through each one of them. If it's good, if it's not, I would personally love to summon one of those champions, maybe two of them, maybe three actually, because they're pretty badass. But overall, I would strongly suggest you skip the 2x sacreds. I wouldn't be surprised if next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we are going to have a Path of Light event. Now, at the moment, I don't think I am able to see in-game if we have a champion chase tournament starting. Probably we will be able to see if anything starts in around 4 or 5 minutes. Starting Thursday, which is tomorrow, guys, we will have 2x on sacreds. This time around, it will be 1 day longer, lasting for exactly 96 hours, all the way to Monday morning, if you are in Europe, of course. So basically, during these 2x sacreds, we're gonna have each one of the faction unity champions. Starting on Thursday, May 23rd, we're gonna have a 10x event to summon Dunlord Gregor from Ancients, Primals, and Sacred Shards. Dunlord is the new faction unity champion from the Barbarian faction. I released a video on this guy. Feel free to check it out. Together with Armans, he can be really powerful. And another thing that they can basically do, they can reset each other's skills, you know? So that's actually a pretty interesting thing. If you have multiple ones in the same team, who knows, maybe in the future you're going to be able to pull off some crazy things. It really depends what other characters they are bringing into the Barbarian faction. Maybe new mythicals, maybe new legendary champions. So overall, I do think that he is pretty decent. He can work very nice with Armans as well. I do think he's a bit harder to make a strong Barbarian team. But hey, you have Turvold, you have Alice in the faction. I'm not saying you have them on your account. So together with Armans, Gregor, you could potentially pull something pretty nice off, you know? With the A1, basically, he has a chance to provoke. The A2 attacks all enemies, decreases the duration of all enemy buffs, and increases the duration of all ally buffs by 1 turn, places a shield. And how you've noticed on the A3, he can give you increased attack, increased accuracy, decrease the cooldown of all ally skills except these champions by 1 turn, fills the turn meter by 20%, or activates an instant turn effect on the ally with the highest crit damage. This, of course, if you have 3 more barbarians in your team. The passive as well, when attacked, has a chance to put provoke. Allies deal 25% more damage to enemies under crowd control debuffs. Faction allies will ignore 50% of the target's resistance when applying stun or other crowd control debuffs when you have multiple barbarians in the team. And when counterattacking, instant effects and debuffs placed by ally skills cannot be resisted or blocked. So if you have somebody with A1. Now, this is a bit nasty for a Turvold, because if you have a full team of barbarians, his weaken will land, which will have a pretty high chance to get polymorphed, you know? Then you have the aura, you get the defense, and you're getting extra accuracy for barbarians. So this champion is on for Thursday. If we are talking about Friday, guys. So Friday, we have Aeling, the Stalwart, again, Primal, Sacred, and Ancient Shards. Now, honestly, I'm not a big fan of this champion. I know a lot of you guys like him. A lot of people try to make insane combos with Marichka and Taras. They just don't seem to work very well together, in my opinion. And it's hard to bring in the fourth barbarian. overall, alone as a champion to support the faction without Marichka and Taras, I think he's pretty decent. I think he can work pretty well for the faction. You have stun on the A1, will ignore resistance if the champion is under shield, then heals all allies by the total value of all shields on all allies. The problem is that he removes the shields, so this is one of the things that I just don't like at all. The damage from here is not going to be mind-blowing or anything like that. I haven't really tried him to use him in a similar way with Yannicka, and that's mainly because his damage is capped at 1000% of this champion's defense. So you cannot exceed that regardless of how big the shield is, So that's kind of like one of my main problems with him is this skill, removing the shield. The A3 places a shield buff on all allies and an ally protection. Then if you have one faction ally, instantly activates this skill whenever an ally is revived. Will not put the skill on cooldown. If there are multiple champions on the team, only one will activate. Then, if you have two allies, places a block damage buff on this champion, not on your team. And buffs placed by this skill cannot be removed. I don't think many people use champions that strip buffs in high-end arena to make it meta, except, of course, you do have Armans and you have the mythical from the high elf faction, which overall they are very powerful and they strip buffs, so you could say that Skratch, you're wrong. People do use a lot of champions that strip buffs in the high end arena, but at the same time I do personally think that it's very hard to get value out of him in high end arena, And the passive, allies under a shield buff receive 10% less damage, which is actually nice, but the only problem is that he removes his shield, so this passive will quickly get nullified. You can always stop that A2. So you do have a few more benefits in here. Allies under shield are immune to all of the crowd control debuffs, which can be nice against Armans. So you're not going to get a stun, but he will still steal your turn meter. Allies under ally protection have a chance to counterattack. And the value of all ally shield buffs is increased by 100%, except shield buff granted by artifact sets. You have a defense and HP aura. So overall, he's not too bad. Now on Saturday, guys, this is one of my most favorite ones, and it's the faction unity champion from the High Elves, and we are talking about Fylja, Blade of Aravia. She's very, very nice for Hydra. I have a clanmate pulling some insane, disgusting damage with her in the team for Hydra. Big shout out to Setais here. So with the A1, attacks an enemy, has a chance of increasing the cooldown of a random skill on the target by 2 turns. When counterattacking with this skill, teams up with a random ally. The ally joining the attack will use their default skill. That can be very nice too. This places a block debuffs, a block damage, and a counterattack on a target ally for 2 turns. If the target of the skill is not this champion, resets the cooldown of all of the target skills. Okay, this is massive, all of the skills. And you don't actually need to have anyone else crazy in the team to get this job done with this skill. So it's kind of like a white Ryanea. Of course, she cannot reset herself or anything like that. But overall, being able to constantly reset your Tranda, for example, in Hydra is actually very solid. And you can always use a champion from the High Elves faction. You can get increased attack, increased crit rate, increased crit damage on all allies for 2 turns. If you have one champion from the High Elves, grants her an extra turn. So you can basically bring in a Balinor for defense down and weaken, bring in an Arbiter for more turn meter and revive if you really need her, but the best combo is definitely with Balinor. Then if you have 2 allies from the High Elves, before placing buffs, removes all debuffs from all allies, and if you have 3 buffs placed by this skill, cannot be removed, which again is going to be nice, but very hard to make it work with the current champions that we have in the game. You can even run it with different High Elves champion and get some value out of her, The passive, whenever a buff is placed on an ally, fills their turn meter by 3%. If you have one faction ally, allies deal 25% more damage when attacking out of their active turn. And this, it doesn't mean that it needs to be a High Elf that deals the damage. It's all allies. At least that's how it's kind of like worded in here. 2 faction allies, whenever a buff is removed or stolen from an ally, or when it expires, fills their turn meter. 3 faction allies will ignore 5% of the target's defense for each buff on them, which overall is not going to be extremely helpful for for Hydra, but still is a pretty nice champion, and I would definitely like to summon her. You have speed, speed aura, and you're getting crit rate for high elves only. Then we have the final champion, which is on Sunday, guys, the Sacred Order faction unity. Falman, he can be so nasty. If you guys watch the video on him, and if you're building up the momentum with the right characters, and you have them in Stone Skin so they survive, so he can build up his skill and passive, he can take 0 damage from any enemy. Okay, 0 damage, which is just crazy. And then he can smack so freaking hard. So with the A1, attacks an enemy, heals the champion by 50% of the damage inflicted, and if there's any surplus, will put a shield. When attacking using the Burning Courage skill instead, will attack using the Burning Courage skill instead if the target is from the Corrupted Alliance, which is very, very nice because you have a lot of bad boy champions in the Corrupted Alliance. With the A2, attacks all enemies. Damage inflicted by this skill increases by 5% for each buff and debuff on the target, and will ignore 25% of the target's defense if they have no buffs, which is a bit hard to pull off nowadays because most of the champions will have some buffs in arena, at least in the high-end arena. And this Burning Courage skill attacks an enemy. Before attacking, removes all buffs from the target. Damage increases by 20% for each buff removed. Now, hear me out. If you are doing an ally attack with Cardiel, for example, and you're attacking champions from the Corrupted Alliance, he will use this skill instead of the basic skill, even in the ally attack, which is very, very solid. I had tons of fun using this champion, actually. Then, before attacking with one faction ally, steals all buffs from the target instead. This effect cannot be resisted, which is actually very important. Damage increases by 20 for each buff stolen. Then, two faction allies, the damage inflicted by this skill increases by 20 for each turn taken by an ally or an enemy before this champion's next turn. Resets at the end of this champion's turn. So you kind of like want to have him slow, allowing the rest of the champions to take a lot of turns before the enemies, your team. So like this, he builds up this skill, and of course, we're gonna get to the other part in a second. With 3 faction allies, will attack all remaining enemies with any surplus damage. If the initial target is killed, this attack cannot be critical. If the initial target survives, places a guaranteed True Fear debuff on all enemies for 1 turn. This right here is the creme de la creme. Decreases the damage taken by this champion by 10% for each turn taken by an ally or an enemy before this champion's next turn. And I mentioned, he will take 0 damage. Like literally, you're gonna see 0 on the screen when a Taras nukes or anything like that happens. And if you have one faction ally, will fill the ally's turn meter by 2% whenever they place a buff or debuff. With 2 of them, places a revive buff on that for 1 turn on an ally whenever their HP drops below 50%. And 3 faction allies counters all of the increased cooldown champions in the game. Warlord, Dumeko, Crixia. Because all allies are immune to cooldown increasing effects. Now, Crixia can counter this team pretty well because she will strip buffs. Okay, so that will be a bit of a problem. And then your team might not stay alive. Of course, you have Armans and other champions that can counter it. But he's tons of fun. Now, I do think that in the future, if they will bring more OP champions in this faction, they will definitely have a chance to be the top of the meta. The aura increases allies' attack in all battles by 30% and increases the crit rate. So that's what we have for this weekend in terms of the summoning event, guys. 2x Sacreds, 10x on all of the faction unity champions, and it seems like we have no news right here to see if we have a champ chase tournament starting or anything like that. I don't think anything changed on this page either, unfortunately. So I'm not sure if they will do a different event like a Deck of Fate or something like that. I think we would probably know by now, or maybe it's gonna take like 50 more minutes to be displayed in game, because how I mentioned, this news came in pretty early. But that was all for the video. I just wanted to give you a warning. I wouldn't jump in to open my Sacreds if I would want to get a soul for the current fusion for Wixwell. And I do think that for a lot of people will be pretty impactful, but at the same time, I don't think it will be a complete game changer for most of the accounts out there to get the soul. Plus, it's gonna be pretty expensive, and usually, as free to play, you might not be prepared for it straight after the fusion. I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.